We have a lot of options to choose from when it comes to storing our data. We can keep data in memory or export it to a file on disk. We can keep it in a local database or even choose to use a hosted option in the cloud. In this video, I want to show you how we can connect our web API to a database. And in this case, we're going to use MongoDB. If you're unfamiliar with MongoDB, it's a really popular open source database that actually stores its information as JSON documents. It has support across a wide variety of programming languages and even supports a C# client. Now, one of the things I really love about Mongo is that I have the ability to download their database server locally and use it while I'm doing development. And when I'm ready, I could switch over to a hosted option using something like Azure Cosmos DB. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about Mongo, I definitely recommend you check out some of our documentation. But for now, let's head over to Visual Studio and see how we can connect Mongo to our web API. Before we head over to Visual Studio, I want to show you the instance of MongoDB that I have running on my machine. Here I created a database called Cookbook, and inside of Cookbook, I have a collection called Recipes. Now, if you're coming from the SQL world, a collection is very similar to a table. And inside of my collection, I have a lot of information that I pre-populated with different recipes that I really like. Now let's head over to Visual Studio. The first thing I want to do is add some of those connection string settings. And the way that we'll do that is using our app settings file. Notice that I'm including the connection string, the name of the database we want to connect to, and also the name of the collection. Next, we need to add that NuGet package that we talked about earlier. So I'm going to right click and go to Manage NuGet Packages. And now we're going to search for the Mongo driver. This is the official MongoDB package that we want to install. Notice that I have this little green checkbox there. That just means that it's already installed in my application. Next, let's wire up Mongo to our app. I created this little helper method here called add MongoDB. And what it does is look into our app settings file and pull out that configuration information and pass it to that Mongo client that we'd have gotten from that NuGet package. Inside of our startup.cs file, if we head down to configure services, you'll see on line 29 that I'm making that call to that method, add MongoDB. On line 30, you might notice I'm adding something else, the Mongo recipe data store. This is just a class that I created to make it a little bit easier to work with MongoDB and our recipes API. There's one other change that I think you might be interested in as well. If we take a look at our recipes record, you might see that I've added some additional information to it. I've added some more properties, and I've also turned ingredients from a string to another record. So now we can store more information about ingredients such as name, amount, and the units. The last thing that we want to do here is connect all of this to our recipes controller. Now, if you recall that Mongo recipe data store that we wired up in our startup.cs file, we can actually ask for an instance of that, and ASP.NET Core will provide it for us. And the way that we can do that is by creating a constructor for our recipes controller. And the parameter that our constructor accepts needs to be the interface that our Mongo recipe data store implements. So as you can see now, once we get that, we can start using it inside of our action methods. So if we take a look at our get operation, notice that we're no longer relying on those hard-coded values. Instead, I can use our data store to query for a collection of recipes. Notice that I'm still able to use the query string parameter to specify the number of recipes I want to have returned. Let's run this and see how it works. Here inside of my Swagger UI, I want to check out our get operation. I'll hit try out, and I'll enter the number of recipes I want to return. So I'm going to put 3 and hit execute. As I scroll down, you can see that we got that 200 status code, but also notice all of this information that we're getting returned. So not only am I getting the title, but I'm also getting the description and also detailed information about the ingredients such as the name, the amount, and the units of measurement. And now you've seen how we can move away from those hard-coded values and instead get our information from a database. In the next video, we're going to learn how we can validate data that comes over in our API requests.